Greetings and salutations, everyone. I'm Mac, and welcome to another introspective on each class in the Star Wars The Old Republic. If you haven't seen my Jedi Sentinel video, then I recommend you go watch that, because I'm going to be talking about certain things, and I'm going to expect you to already know them from that video. So then, the Sith Assassin is basically the complete opposite. Its base class is the Sith Inquisitor. The alternate advanced class is the Sith Sorcerer. This is a double lightsaber class, so let's get into how it works. Rather than having focus, you have force. You have 100 points of force, and practically all of your ability, well, not all, but most of them are going to have some sort of force cost on it. Thankfully, your force will go up gradually over time, but it's still something to keep in mind, that your resources are going to be very different compared with everyone else, for reasons we'll get into later. Your basic attack is Saber Strike. It costs absolutely no force, but I do need to say that all the base attack for the Knight, the Warrior, the Inquisitor and the Consular, whatever was the first ability you got, it has a special animation if you can get a killing blow with it. It's fun, but relatively pointless. Thrash is your basic force attack. Strike the target twice for weapon damage. It does use up your force, but whatever. Shock is your bread and butter. It's a basic force attack. Shock the target for energy damage. Standard and weak targets are additionally stunned for a few seconds. I can't tell because the rotten hotbar is in the way, sorry. Discharge. Blast the target with raw lightning damage, dealing energy damage over 18 seconds. If you'll pardon me for just a brief moment. This one needs to be... Now I can see what these are saying. Deals damage over time, so it's your basic dot. Overload. Deal damage in an arc in front of you. Knock back up to 8 enemies within a 15-meter cone. Standard and weak enemies are knocked down for an additional 3 seconds. Originally this was in a circle around you, but it was proving to be more trouble because, well, you saw all. There's quite a few people with abilities that last for to crowd control their target for 60 seconds, and that damage kept breaking them out of it. It didn't get along very well with the system, so eventually they made it easier to aim. It also had a longer animation time, but they fixed that. Or rather, they ruined it by fixing it. Electrocute is your basic stun. Electrocute the target for energy damage, stun it for 4 seconds. Recklessness is a damage buff, and it's kinda cool. Grant 2 charges of Recklessness, increasing force critical chance of your direct attacks and heals by 60%, so 60% is actually quite a lot given how much crit chance you can get already, but you get 2 stacks. Each time a direct force ability critically hits, or when a channeled ability is activated, you lose a charge. It lasts for 20 seconds. Unbreakable Will is your breakout of crowd control ability, very handy. Whirlwind is one of those sleep effects I mentioned. Trap the target in a whirlwind for 8 seconds. Non-player, non-standard, and non-weak targets will heal rapidly while trapped, so don't think of it as a way to buy your time against anything tough. Think of it more as a way to keep them out of the fight while you take out their friends. Mark of Power is the class buff. Increase the target's mastery by 5%, and increase their internal and elemental damage by 10% for 60 minutes. If target is a group member, all other group members are affected. You have the quick travel, you have your out of battle heal, Sieve, based on Darth Maul because, well, double-bladed lightsaber. Of course it's based on Darth Maul. Speaking of which, Maul. Deal weapon damage to a single target if used from behind them. Or, well, rather, you deal damage to the target. But if you do it from behind them, it deals more. It's just that you can't get behind this operations dummy. Force Slow. Deals some kinetic damage to the target, but it also slows them down significantly for 6 seconds. Mind Control. Control the mind of the target, forcing them to attack you for 6 seconds. Player targets deal 30% less damage for 6 seconds if attacking anyone other than you. This is a defensive ability, Deflection. Increased ranged and melee defenses by 50% for 12 seconds. Note that it doesn't say anything about force or tech abilities. Unfortunate. Varying Slash is actually a high level skill before you get to learn it, and it's kind of disappointing. Strike in a Cone, so it's an AoE, dealing damage and slowing their movement speed by 50% for 3 seconds. It's not nearly as impressive as some of the other things you could get. Jolt is an Interrupt. Interrupt the target's current action, prevent it from being used for 4 seconds. Assassinate is your Execute ability. Deal weapon damage, but only on people below 30% HP. Lacerate, way over here, is a spammable AoE, but it uses up a lot of force, so keep that in mind. Mass Mind Control. This one varies based on your discipline. If Dark Charge is active, it is a great in AoE Taunt, because that's your tank set. If Dark Charge is not active, reduce threat between all enemies. So it functions like Force Camouflage if you're not in your tank discipline. And either way, player targets deal 30% less damage when attacking anyone other than you. Force Speed is not really a gap closer. It gives you a way to move about quickly, but it's not nearly as much fun as Force Charge. What is a gap closer is Phantom Stride. Use the Force to move through time and space appearing at your target. And increase your movement speed for 3 seconds. Does not break stealth, cannot be used against targets in cover, requires the double-bladed lightsaber. Because Sith Assassin is a tank stealth hybrid. Well, in stealth, basically, when you're in stealth, you get a stealth level of 15 and you're difficult to detect. But you also have a 15% movement speed. The companion doesn't react to enemy attacks. Your companion will also be covered in stealth as well, so presumably your abilities in the Force also extend to them. Most hostile actions prematurely end the effect. You also can't use it in combat. Also in the idea of stealth is Force Cloak. Even in combat, you can use this to exit combat and enter stealth. 10 seconds, you're virtually undetectable. This is... how do I put this? In single player content, it's useless. It's basically an emergency, I don't want to be in this fight anymore, get me out. And sometimes it doesn't work because enemies have dots going on your companion and will immediately aggro on you again. And the thing is that there are abilities that gain advantages from jumping into stealth quickly and jumping out again. But enemies, if they aren't engaged with anyone, will immediately de-aggro and heal back to full, so we're not going to see any of the tactics used for it here. Force Shroud is another defensive cooldown. Purge all hostile removable effects. Increase your chance to resist force and tech attacks by 200% for 3 seconds. And here's the thing. The way accuracy works is that once you make it over 100% accuracy, it decreases the opponent's time. It defenses the opponent's chance to evade with their defense. So high defense and accuracy basically counter each other. Just as if resistance it counters the force and tech abilities. If you are 200%, then it means that it is going to be impossible even for people that focus into accuracy to hit you. The only things that are hitting you are scripted things. And we also have Mind Trap, which is the actual sleep that you want to assassin for. Trap the target's mind, leaving them unable to act for 60 seconds. Damage will break the effect prematurely. Only usable from stealth, and cannot be used against people in combat. And you can only have it on effect on one person at a time, and can't use it on droids. There's so many caveats. Basically, it's a better version of Whirlwind, but can only be used on unengaged enemies. And people in dungeons will use this to bypass so much stuff, it's not even funny. And because I have to show it, we have Spike. Spike the target on an overloaded lightsaber, dealing damage and stunning them for 2 seconds. It knocks down standard and weak enemies. Requires a double-bladed lightsaber, only usable in stealth. So yeah, it's a crowd control for entering combat from stealth. And 2 more things before we get into the specifics of the disciplines. First of all, Overcharge Saber. Overcharge your lightsaber for 15 seconds, immediately restoring 15% of your maximum health. Increases charge damage by 50%. And increase the chance to trigger the effects by 25%, healing you whenever you trigger it. The healing obviously can't trigger more than once per second, and you do need the double-bladed lightsaber to trigger the effect. The other thing is something that we can't show because we don't have any party members. Guard. Target this onto an allied party member or companion. While active, the guarded player takes 5% less damage and generates 25% less threat. In addition, as long as you remain within 15 meters of them, 50% of all damage from enemy players is transferred to you. It's quite handy for putting on priority people to protect. Originally, you had to specifically be in tank stance to use it, but as it is, well, they got rid of stances. And there's another thing to jump into. The assassin doesn't wield 2 primary weapons. Instead, they have an offhand focus or shield generator depending on what class they are. Well, discipline. For me, I have the shield on now because I normally tank on this. But anyhow, Assassin's Training, increased total endurance by 3%, Saber Strike restores 1 force each time it damages an enemy. Discharge, we need to get back to that in a bit, but Lightning Charge. Lightning pulses through your weapon, giving your melee attacks a 50% chance to deal energy damage. This is the equivalent of forms for the Sentinel, so you can expect that to change as we go through different classes. And Thrashing Blades increases the damage dealt by Thrash, Lacerate, Voltaic Slash, and Leeching Strike by 5%. We also have proficiency in Electrostaffs. If we look at the Inquisitor stuff, well, there's not really anything here that wasn't in there. So let's have a look at the disciplines. First of all, the Darkness discipline is Tank. It's the utility spec for this class. Step 1 is Depredating Volts, and it's really unfortunate because originally you also had Force Lightning shared in this class, shared with the Sith Sorcerer. Unfortunately, the devs really don't like channeled abilities on melee classes, so they took away Force Lightning completely, and they gave it was an important part of this class, so they gave us Depredating Volts, which is a channeled ability. Deal energy damage and consume 40 force over duration of the channel. Slow the movement speed of the target by 50%, stun weak or standard enemies while channeled, and unlike most channeled abilities, you can move while using it. Dark Charge replaces Lightning Charge, so this is the tank stance. Dark energy courses through your weapon, giving your melee attacks a 50% chance to deal internal damage and generate an additional threat. Reduce damage dealt by 10%, but increases armor rating by 130%, shield chance by 15%, threat generation by 150%, and accuracy by 10%. Okay, so here's something I should have addressed at the start. The Inquisitor... There's basically armor weights in this game. You have light armor, heavy armor, and medium armor. Each of them has a different armor rating stat on it. Armor rating affects your physical defenses, so the higher your armor rating is, the less damage you take from energy and kinetic. Internal and elemental damage will bypass it completely, but we already have a 10% resistance to that because of Mark of Power. The Inquisitor class and the Consular class are both locked to light armor, so they have the lowest damage resistance of all. That didn't work out too well for the Assassins, because they're tank classes, so they get a bonus armor rating just by being a tank. Another catch with this is that at the start, this was actually a self-healing tank. So using your Force Lightning ability or just getting your charge triggers would heal you for quite a bit of your health. But that made it a nightmare to balance, I assume, because eventually they took out that self-healing because counting on it made it the class was basically self-sufficient but also really easy to spike by bad RNG. Especially because of the shield generator was also expected to deal a lot of the resistance, but we'll get to that in a bit. Torment. The effects of Discharge are modified. Discharge causes its targets to become unsteady for 45 seconds. Unsteady targets have their melee and ranged accuracy reduced by 5%. And Lacerate deals extra damage to unsteady targets. So that's another one of those shared debuffs. Electrify. Shock deals 20% more damage and consumes less force. Thrash and Lacerate inflict their targets with trauma, which reduces the healing received for 6 seconds. Swelling Shadows increase armor rating by 20% and damage reduction by 2%, because we all need more damage reduction on our tanks, right? Dark Ward is interesting. Surround you in a Dark Ward with 15 charges, increasing shield chance by 15% for 20 seconds. Each time you shield, Dark Ward loses 1 charge, it doesn't break stealth, and it doesn't respect the global cooldown. So let's go over shields as well. The shield chance, basically shields are sort of a mini defense reduction. If you get a defense that is a parry, a deflect, or a resist, then you take absolutely no damage from the attack whatsoever. For tanks, you also get a shield chance, which is a chance for a mini defend. The shield rating affects your shield chance, which is how likely you are to get the shield. The shield absorption is how much of the damage you take instead of the full damage. So the Assassin was very much focused on its ability to basically get much higher shield chances than others, and they get those absorbs it to reduce the damage, but that just fed into the spikiness, because even you would still have those dry streaks of not getting any shield whatsoever, and that would be full damage hitting your light armor body for a lot more than I'd like to say. Blood of the Sith. Increase the rate at which you regenerate force by 30%, increase internal and elemental damage reduction by 10%. Dark Bulwark. This is where the Dark Ward gets interesting. Consuming a Dark Ward chance increases shield absorption by 1%. It stacks up to 8 times. It lasts for 20 seconds or until Dark Ward is reactivated. So it becomes sort of a game where you want to keep your Dark Wards up, but you also don't want to keep refreshing them because you do get a bonus for your shield absorption. Energize. Damage dealt by Thrash, Maul, Lacerate, and Assassinate has a 30% chance to finish the cooldown on Shock and make your next shock a critical hit. If it consumes a charge of Recklessness, then it deals an additional 50% critical damage. Lightning Reflexes. Increase melee and ranged defenses by 4%. Whenever you shield, parry, or deflect, you recover 2% of your total force and increase the damage dealt by Discharge by 75%. This can't occur more than 1 per second, and it doesn't stack. So yeah, often your force regeneration comes from being hit and successfully shielding or parrying or deflecting, meaning that if you're in... It basically means that multiple tanks, unless you're doing content that needs multiple tanks, won't have a nice time keeping their attack combos going. Wither. Cause a target up to 8 targets to wither under the weight of the force, dealing kinetic damage, slowing the movement speed by 30% for 10 seconds, and weakening them for 45 seconds, making weakened targets deal 5% less melee and ranged damage. It doesn't damage sleeping, lifted, or incapacitated enemies, so if you mind trap someone and then hit someone else with Wither, they'll stay in the mind trap. Very important stuff. This ability also generates bonus threat. Mounting Darkness. When you use Deflection, that is the ranged and melee defenses boost up, you gain Mounting Darkness, causing all enemies within 8 meters to deal less force and tech damage. This effect lasts for the duration of Deflection, and it also increases the damage dealt by Discharge and Wither by 20%. And now, we finally get to do something special with Depreding Vaults. Shock and Wither grant Harness Darkness, making the next Depreding Vaults uninterruptible and immune to pushback. In addition, each stack increases the damage dealt by your next Depreding Vaults by 15%. Stacks up to 3 times, and at 3 stacks each tick grants Dark Protection, increasing damage reduction by 1%. It stacks up to 4 times, it lasts 12 seconds, it was originally self-healing. It isn't anymore. I'm sad. Level 52 Lightning Recovery. Increase the amount of force recovered by lightning reflexes by 100%, so that's... Oh boy, where was that? Here. 2% of your total force, so that means we now get 4% of the total force. And whenever you shield, parry, or deflect, the active cooldown of Force Shroud is reduced by a second. So that's the immunity to all force and tech abilities. But you can't get it more than once a second. And the reason they keep specifying once per second is because you can actually take a lot of little hits in 1 second. So they need these cooldown effects. Conspirators Cloak. Exiting stealth immediately grants 4 stacks of Dark Protection, so that's the thing for getting a full channel of Depredating Vaults. In addition, Thrash, Lacerate, Assassinate, and Phantom Stride grant Conspirators Cloak, making your next Maul consume 50% less force and deal damage as if you are behind the target, regardless of your actual positioning. You can't get it more than once every 10 seconds. So your backstab skill gets some use even as a tank. Force Pull. Use the force to draw the target in, instantly pulling it to your location and generating a high amount of threat. Doesn't work against targets in cover. So it's the reverse of Force Charge or Assassin Stride. It does have a minimum range effect though. But it can be useful for pulling people away from each other if you need to do... It has utility purposes. Premonition. Increase stealth detection level by 5, defense by 2%, and shield absorption by 4%. In addition, when you activate Overcharged Saber, damage reduction is increased by 25% for the duration. So Overcharged Saber becomes sort of a defensive cooldown for the tank class. especially given that it's still going to be able to heal you every time you trigger your effect. And you already had a 50% chance of triggering it. So it's 3 in 4 chance you're going to heal yourself every time you hit someone with a lightsaber. Shroud of Darkness. Increased damage reduction and endurance by 2% and allows for Spike to be used out of stealth mode. Remember Spike? That was the thing that would stun a target but could only be used out in stealth. So now you're a bit of a crowd control character. Recklessness also grants 30% shield absorption for 20 seconds. So, yeah, more defensive cooldown abilities. And finally, Dark Bastion. The cooldown of Dark Ward is reduced by 5 seconds. The shield chance is increased by an additional 3%. And shielding, while it is active, has a 20% chance to restore a charge and increase active duration by a second. In addition, it can build an additional 2 stacks in Dark Bulwark, so that's the shield absorption by 1%. So, yeah, you rely an awful lot on your buffs to keep things going. It's a complicated tank class, but I kind of like it. Now, Deception. This was your middle class, so it has its own charge, but that's not the important thing. Reaping Strike. Lash the target with an acrobatic strike, dealing a significant amount of weapon damage, only usable from stealth or within 15 seconds of performing a critical strike. It requires a double-bladed lightsaber or electro staff. This wasn't in the game last I played, so that's kinda cool. I'll have to figure out where I want to put that. Surging Charge. Raw force energy surges through your weapon, giving melee attacks a 50% chance to build internal damage and build one static charge. Static charges stack up to 3 times and increase the damage dealt by your next discharge. This can't occur more than once every 6 seconds. In addition, the effects of your discharge ability are modified. It replaces lightning charge. Basically, discharges become an internal damage attack. So at 3 stacks, you've got a very powerful force attack hitting one person past their armor rating. Deception is your backstab stealth class. To put it lightly, actually, yeah, they have little blurbs here. I probably should have talked about those, but I didn't. Oh well, why change it now? Whirling Edge at level 16. Increase armor penetration by 10%, increase critical chance of lacerate by 15%, and the bonus damage by 30%. Induction. Thrash, Lacerate, Voltaic Slash, Reaping Strike, Maul, and Assassinate grant induction, reducing the force cost of your next shock or ball lightning by 25%. It stacks up to 2 times. So a 50% damage bonus to shock. Good to know. Saber Conduit. Your surging charge restores 9 force over 9 seconds when it deals damage to a target, but it can't occur more than once every 12 seconds. Lacerate builds charges of voltage, and Discharge causes target to become vulnerable for 45 seconds. Vulnerable targets take extra damage from force attacks. But yeah. Whatever. Voltaic Slash. Important, this replaces Thrash. Strike the target twice, dealing weapon damage with each hit. Each use builds voltage, which gives shock and ball lightning a 50% chance to trigger your surging charge off its normal rate limit. Stacks up to 2 times, requires a double-bladed lightsaber or an electro staff. So this is important. You use Voltaic Slash twice. You use shock. You get a surging charge. Meanwhile, you're also fishing for surging charge procs. Once you get to 3 charges, you use Discharge. That's how the class works. Dark Embrace. While in stealth mode and for 15 seconds after leaving it, you get 25% force regeneration increase. Not useful if you're single playering the game. Duplicity. Direct damage attacks grant Duplicity, causing your next maul to deal 20% more damage and consume 75% less force. This effect can't occur more than once every 10 seconds. Maul grants 15 seconds of Dark Embrace. While Dark Embrace is active, damage taken is reduced by 15%. So, backtracking. Force regeneration increase for using Maul. And you get a damage increase, a damage reduction in important stuff. Shock and Ball Lightning have a 50% chance to attack the target twice, with the second attack dealing half damage, but the second attack can't trigger Surging Charge. Whatever. Yes, I mean, with how we're able to get the voltage buffs to get the Surging Charge off Shock, it's kind of fair that you can't get the Surging Charge off the second Ball Lightning or Shock. Low Slash. Slash the target, dealing weapon damage and incapacitating them for 4 seconds. Damage causes the effect to end prematurely, requires double-bladed lightsaber or electro staff. So this is an in-battle sleep you can use immediately. And it's very useful for getting into position so you can use Maul on your single-player content, provided they don't have some immunity to crowd control. Those do exist. Electric Ambush. Recklessness builds 3 static charges. Exiting combat reduces the active cooldown by 60 seconds. Additionally, critical damage dealt by Maul increased by 30%. So, basically, a reminder. Recklessness increases the critical chance of force attacks. Discharge is a force attack. Discharge at 3 static charges is a very powerful internal damage attack. This is definitely a spike damage class, or discipline. Maul sunders the target. If you remember, Sunder was also the effect from Jedi Sentinel. It reduces their armor by 20%. Entropic Field. Dealing critical damage grants Entropic Field, increasing damage reduction by 3% for 15 seconds and it stacks up to 3 times. Dominating Slashes increases damage dealt by Lacerate and Voltaic Slash and Reaping Strike by 20%. Ball Lightning replaces Shock. Blast the target with Ball Lightning for energy damage. It stuns them for 3 seconds, which is basically the same duration as Shock was. So it doesn't do anything more interesting, it's just more powerful and differently animated. Sith Executioner. Increased damage dealt to targets below 30% of their max HP, reduces Assassinate's force cost by 10. I am not away from keyboard, thank you. Crackling Blasts. Increase critical strike damage from Discharge and Ball Lightning by 20%. Let's finish this off. Amped Voltage. Activating Phantom Stride also builds 3 static charges, so you can really spam Discharge. No wonder there's a cooldown on how often you can use it. And finishing it off, let's look at Hatred. This is the skill tree that was shared with the Sith Sorcerer, so let's start off. Death Field. Actually, no, let's talk about something else. Originally, these were skill trees, and I remember very specifically that Assassin had a very nasty cross-class, or cross-skill tree build. You would invest into the Hatred skill tree just far enough to get the Death Field, and then put everything else into Deception. So now you had some because Death Field was actually a very strong force attack as well, and internal damage, so it bypasses armor. You had a very large... You basically, if it was for PvP and spike damaging everyone, I guess it was things like that that got them to swap over to the discipline style instead of the skill trees. Anyway, Death Field. Create a Death Field at target location, dealing internal damage and stealing life from affected targets to heal you for 10% of damage dealt. strike up to 8 targets within a 5-meter radius. Fanaticism. Reduce the force consumed by Death Field by 20. So, it's 50 cost, now it's 30. Crackling Charge. Discharge deals 30% more damage. The critical hit chance of lightning charges increased by 50%. So this discharge effect of blast them with raw lightning over 18 seconds, this is the default stance that it was for. Nefarious Methods. Reduce damage taken from periodic effects by 15%. Mass Mind Control increases damage reduction by 30% for 6 seconds. Profuse Horror. Lacerate and Severing Slash spread your periodic discharge and creeping terror effects to damage targets they damage as long as it hits people already affected by it. In addition, Death Field overwhelms its targets for 45 seconds. Overwhelmed targets take more damage from area of attacks. Eradicate. Crush the target with devastating force, dealing kinetic damage initially, plus an additional kinetic damage over 6 seconds. The target also becomes vulnerable, increasing damage taken from force attacks by 5%. This replaces shock, so maybe now you've started to figure out that this is a damage over time class. Although for some reason the game always calls them periodic effects. Raise. Melee attacks that strike a target affected by discharge grant raise, finishing the cooldown on Eradicate and making honest Eradicate cost no force. Additionally, Phantom Stride grants raise, but raise cannot occur more than once every 9 seconds. Death Field places a death mark on affected targets, increasing the amount of damage the target suffers from your next 15 periodic damaging abilities by 15%. Lasts 30 seconds. So yeah, now Death Field ties into your dots. Anyone you hit is going to take a bit of extra damage from your dots. Increase all periodic damage dealt by 15%. Increase damage dealt by Eradicate by 20%. Sure, why not? Creeping Terror. Paralyze the target in fear, dealing internal damage over 18 seconds and immobilizing it for 2 seconds. The immobilizing effect can't occur more than once every 9 seconds. So, how many dots is this now? We have 1, 2, 3 different dots tying into your Death Field marks. Creeping Terror now deals 10% additional damage, and when your lightning charge deals damage, it restores force. Your damaging periodic effects have a 30% chance to trigger Bloodletting, which finishes the active cooldown on Assassinate, and you can use it on a target with any health level. You can't do this more than once every 15 seconds. Increase the life stolen by Death Field and Leeching Strike by 100%. Causes Creeping Terror and Lightning Charge's discharge effect to steal life from enemy targets, healing you for 10% of the damage they deal. So you do actually heal back a little bit of health in this class. Not very much though, and you're still light armor. Be wary. Death Field, Eradicate, and periodic damage abilities deal more damage on targets under 30% health. Leeching Strike. Sap the life away from a target, dealing weapon damage to the target and healing you for 50% of the damage dealt. Requires a double-bladed lightsaber or electro staff. Replaces Maul, so you are no longer a backstabs class. Also 12-second cooldown. Claws of Decay. Increase critical strike damage dealt by Thrash, Assassinate, Leeching Strike by 12%. Reduce the force cost of Assassinate by 3. Languishing Lashes. Dealing melee damage increases critical chance of your damaging periodic effects by 20% for 10 seconds. In addition, Leeching Strike deals 20% more damage to targets below 30% health. Leeching Strike deals 5% more damage and restores full force for each of your periodic damage effects up to 3. So let's check. That's 12 of force, and it costs 25. So that's a 50% refund. Not bad. and you should have periodic effects up on them already. So, let's have a look at all these utilities. Avoidance. Reduce the cooldown of Jolt, Unbreakable Will by 30 seconds, and Force Speed by 5 seconds. All pretty useful stuff no matter what you're doing. Actually, let's just jump into this, so we can start picking them out for when we go down to a Rykon. Oppressing Force. Lower the cooldown of Electrocute by 15 seconds, increase the duration of Force Slow, reduce its cooldown by 6 seconds. In addition, Whirlwind affixes 2 additional standard or weak targets within 8 meters. As Darkness, reduce all damage taken while stunned by 30%. In the other disciplines, you'd reduce AoE damage. Increase damage dealt by Lacerate by 25%. Overload binds its targets in electricity, immobilizing them for 5 seconds. But damage dealt after 2 seconds breaks direct damage dealt after 2 seconds ends the effect prematurely. So crowd control. Lacerate, Voltaic Slash, and Thrash reduce the movement speed of targets they damage by 30% for 6 seconds. Targets controlled by Spike and Electrocute take 5% more damage from all sources. And Mass Mind Control provides Assassin's Shelter to all allies within range except yourself, reducing damage taken and healing them over the duration. So your threat drop or AoE Taunt, either way, are going to help out your allies. Nice to have. Reduce the cooldown of Force Cloak by 30 seconds and extend duration by 5 seconds. In the Deception class, and if you're doing anything other than single player content, this is actually a pretty good thing to have for increasing the amount of time you can burst damage someone, but it's no good to me. Increase movement speed by 15% and effective stealth level by 10. Audacity reduces the cooldown of Overload by 2.5 seconds, and Recklessness gains an additional charge when activated, so this is actually kind of nice to have for your DPS. Activating Shock, Ball Lightning, or Eradicate increases movement speed by 50% for 9 seconds, but not more than once every 18 seconds. When a target recovers from being stunned by Spike or Electrocute, 90% movement speed slowed for 3 seconds. Force Cloak increases movement speed by 50% while active. Force Slow increases the movement speed of target by an additional 20%. So definitely for ruining people's movement, not good for what I'm planning. Activating Deflection grants 6 seconds of immunity to stun, sleep, lift, and incapacitating effects. This is nice against crowd control heavy enemies like we're going to be facing. Force Speed grants Immersion, removing movement impairing effects, granting immunity to them for the duration. So, different to crowd controlling. If Whirlwind breaks early from damage, the target is stunned, and Whirlwind activates instantly. Useful if you want to crowd control groups from out of stealth or right after breaking it, or really, it has uses, but yeah, let's take it. And our heroic skills. Activating Force Cloak grants 2 seconds of Force Shroud. So, to go back over what that is, Force Cloak is your immediate stealth skill. Force Shroud gives you immunity to hostile force and tech attacks, and purges effects. So it's useful for getting dots off yourself when you jump out of stealth, and protecting you from things like Overload, where they know you're in the area, they just can't see you. Insulation. This is not a nice one. In fact, I really recommend against this one. When damage breaks your mind trap prematurely, the target will suffer from sapped mind, reducing the damage they deal for 25% for 10 seconds, and you gain another benefit based on your active discipline. In Darkness, you get a movement speed boost during depleting vaults. In Deception and Hatred, you get 30% armor rating, so a bit more damage reduction. The thing is, it used to be that it was simply when they get out of Mind Trap, they self-accept Mind. And in basic group content, that was awful. Because it meant that the moment that you Mind Trapped someone else, you'd end up getting into a fight with that person that you snuck past in the first place. It wasn't fun. And even now, I'm reluctant to go into that. But I am going to be fighting as the main hitter in a fight, so I guess I need it this time. Disjunction. Increased duration of Force Shroud by 2 seconds and Force Speed by 0.5 seconds. Additionally, Force Speed slows all enemies within 5 meters by 75% for 2.5 seconds when activated. I think if anything, that's really not something I want here, because that might actually aggro people while I'm stealthing around. Okay, Phantom Stride grants Reaper's Rush, allowing you to use your next assassinate on any target regardless of health. It lasts 10 seconds. If your original target is killed within Phantom Stride 10 seconds, then Phantom Stride's cooldown is reset. Not assassinates, but still, it has applications. Especially if you're going for killing a bunch of weak enemies all spread out. Force Pull immobilizes its targets for 3 seconds. Leeching Strike immobilizes for 2 seconds. Low Slash immobilizes its target for a second after the incapacitating effect wears off. In addition, successful use of Mind Trap grants Shroud of Darkness, increasing crit chance of your next direct attack by 100%. This effect lasts 20 seconds. Not good for single player content, which we're doing. When entering stealth with Force Cloak, which means that already we don't like this passive, you gain a stack of Renewing Darkness and heal for 4% of maximum health every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Stacks last for 6 seconds. When stealth is broken, you heal up for each stack of Renewing Darkness for 4%. So the way it works is that if you can hold onto your stealth for 10 seconds, you're going to heal for 20%, and if you break after those 10 seconds within 6 seconds, you heal another 20%. Or maybe I'm reading it wrong and it's actually 16-16, but still, that's pretty much a PvP skill because I'm not getting that in single player content. Phasing Phantom. Phantom Strike can be used while immobilized and purges immobilizing effects. Additionally, activating Force Speed grants Phasing Phantasm, which displays a different effect based on your active discipline. In Darkness, you gain Force Regeneration Speed for the duration. In Deception and Hatred, it reduces damage taken by 25% for the duration. So weirdly, they're making it a defensive cooldown for the DPS classes. And the thing that I really wanted. Retaliatory Grip. Deflection grants Retaliatory Grip, reflecting 50% or 100% for the tank spec of all direct single target tech and force damage back at the attacker. It lasts for 12 seconds and doesn't absorb damage. So that means that if you have an absorb effect up, this is going to step in first and repel it all. I think. It's definitely something different. But yeah, worth having. So then, let's land on our Rykron, move our skills around a bit, and see what we get when we when we line everything up. Wait, no, that's the... Sorry. That's the way away from the planet. I want to go down. So the thing is, what I was saying earlier about stances and charges. The tank stance is basically the reason why things were getting awkward, because people could be DPS spec'd but put in tank stance, or they could and that would basically give them survival but let them still hit hard in PvP. Tank stance was also the only way to get shield benefits. We have our archaeologist friend here to help us out with this new content. We want him to be a healer because we're going to be taking a lot of damage. Same planet, different landing zone. So, for our death field spec. Recklessness. Hit them with death field, and then dot them up. Lacerate, spread the dots. And yeah, we don't do much with our hits, but we certainly make them suffer in the long term with all the damage over time. The thing is that we aren't quite a tank spec yet, so we can't really control how many people are going after our friend there. It's not a... The thing is, your whole setting up dots thing, it doesn't work well for lots of small enemies, but due to how hard Death Field hits, you really don't care. Something I didn't show as a Jedi Sentinel. This guy here has Strength of Will. Break the first incapacitating or movement impairing effect they suffer, and then they keep it for a few seconds after. It's quite rude. Now then, let's see how we go against this guy. Put me down. We have our dots up. We have Assassinate ready. We have Death Field. He's being eaten by Death Field marks. Keep an eye on those durations. Refresh them before they fall off. Really basic stuff. If I see him charging something like a Lightning Strike, then I can use it, my Force Shroud to block it. If he's trying to hit me hard with a melee attack, then I just use my Deflection effect. The thing is, my friend Talos there is constantly being hit by Force Lift, which is basically the... it's basically a different name for Whirlwind. I don't like you very much, sir. I remember that Eradicate is shared with the Sith Sorcerer, but originally there was actually a Sorcerer-specific dot, which is also replaced by Eradicate. It had a channel time, so I can understand why they wouldn't want it on this class. With that out of the way, let's swap the specs. We have to do that the proper way. Abandon. Deception. And oh boy, we have to put everything back up. And then reorganize everything because Ball Lightning is Shock. I want it on 3. It's not on 3. Voltaic Slash is what I wanted to be on 2 because it replaces Thrash, but it got moved to 5. I really have frustrations with this whole thing. So, Low Slash on Shift F, Reaping Strike on R, Shock, Ball Lightning, Discharge. All the good stuff. let's show this off and hopefully not. As a stealth class, you can do this. He can't join in the fight as long as I don't hit him with any sort of AoE damage. That's very nice. Now then, apparently, and this because this is a new skill, I'm not used to it, we can open with R.
Just set me up.
1, 2, shock. 1, 2, shock. Discharge is lit up, so it's fully charged. Quite bursty damage, huh? It's kind of funny how the two DPS specs for Assassin are basically the opposite ends of the spectrum. One's the backstab burst class, the other one, it actually lost its backstab, and it's, well, it's now a very slow burn dot class, and I actually remember this girl's here, so let's show this against a champion who might kick my teeth in because she is also crowd control hell. Spike, but it doesn't work because Strength of Will, I forgot. Recklessness, we can use Discharge immediately. 1, 2, Shock, Maul. And we got a crit, so we can use R. Discharge ready. Low slash. Maul from behind. Shock. You see how this is? Reminder. Discharge. Unleash static charge dealing 901 internal damage. It scales up per charge. So this is bypassing their armor quite nicely. You don't need to spam Voltaic Slash, you just need to keep it, weave it into your rotation every now and then to keep the stacks at 2, so you've got guaranteed chance of the extra surging charge. Yeah, it's there. But let's abandon it again because we want to show off the tank class. And again, you have to get everything in order. I keep forgetting which way I want to spec everything up. Reminder, 100% Darkness Discipline Reflect. So anything you could use Force Shroud for, you could also use Deflection to make them really suffer for hitting you. Showing it off. Start off in stealth. No wait. You have to put everything back in its right place. There, that's how I'm used to it. We don't need to use Spike to start the fight, but I want to. Discharge hits everyone nearby. Wither hits everyone nearby. Shock, Wither. Alternate so you build up stacks of Harness Darkness. Shock will refresh itself eventually, so try to use it if it comes off cooldown naturally, because it's always a possibility that your next melee attack is going to refresh it. When you have the crit ability for it, you can use Shock, it hits hard. Is there a boss around that I can absolutely beat down? There we go. I don't like his position. He's too close to that large mob. Mind Trap to break his strength of will. Force Pull. It's easy to keep forgetting to activate your ward. But thankfully this isn't you being quite as fragile as you were at the start. Just a reminder that they still do hit quite a bit. Predict and repel, countered by deflection to reflective edge. Fortunately, even in crowd control heavy enemies like this, you don't need to get the full duration of your Force Lightning to get the dark protection. You just need to get the first one off to reset the duration. Granted, they might just cause you to miss it because they keep stunning you. And yeah, he was actually getting kind of close to killing me. He's in assassinate range. This is about the only class that's really going to get use out of it. It's more, I think. And as you can see, Sith Assassin. It's a complicated class, but it's also an interesting one. And it's invaluable in flashpoints, which are the dungeons, for being able to simply shut down enemies and sometimes bypass fights altogether. Anyway, there's more to come. Till next time guys, take care. We'll see you all around.